Relationships. Sometimes you can stand to live with them, and other times you can't imagine life without them. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, relationships affect everyone's life. The question is there a right way to go about any of this? What is it like to have a healthy biblical friendship, marriage, or budding romance? And what about the parent-child relationships? Is there a way to escape all the drama? This 2-part series seeks to answer all those questions and more. In today's episode, we'll be wrapping up part 2 of this series by focusing on our relationships with friends and family. Today, I'm tackling this topic with licensed counselor Sara Beth Prewitt.
Hey.
Hey. Sara Beth is licensed in community counseling and has been practicing for 13 years. Well, hey, Sara Beth. Thanks for coming out today.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to come out.
Yeah. I'm going to start with this little question here. What made you want to be a counselor?
Growing up, I had a very strong need to want to help others who were struggling somewhat in some of the same situations I was.
Yeah.
And I went to therapy, and it helped me immensely to learn different things about how I cope with things and how to move forward from things.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where my desire came from.
Because the battle isn't always physical. It's sometimes in our own minds.
Exactly.
And hearts. So that's good. I'm glad you came to that and that you've been helping people for so long. It's awesome. Well, I think you're the right person then to ask all these questions to, especially about healthy relationships. So can you tell us, what are some markers of a healthy relationship with family and friends?
It looks different for several people, but I feel like these are some of the main ones: trust, mutual respect, collaboration, feelings of comfort, a sense of fondness and love for the other person, making communication a priority, being authentic, and that you can have hard conversations with tenderness.
Yeah. Well, that's a kind of a long list there, but do you think there could be any more?
Yes, there can be
lots more.
Lots more.
Yeah, but I think that's a good start there. Some of those I've heard before, like the trust, communication, respect. I think we hear that one a lot. So I guess they're important. But why do you think people struggle with, some of those 3 basic building blocks?
Well, those 3 basic building blocks kind of create a circle. So it starts off with mutual respect for somebody. Once you've established mutual respect for somebody, then you can move on to being able to trust that person. And once you can trust that person, then you can freely and openly be able to communicate. And the more you communicate, the more you're showing how much you respect that person and how much you trust that person. So they kind of all 3 go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think where people struggle is that they're not good at communicating how they are actually feeling themselves. They portray or talk about how somebody else, they put the blame on somebody else. Like, you made me feel this way. And that's not good communication in a relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Little softball pitch into that one. I guess we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. But you also, I just can't help but notice that you mentioned the word collaboration earlier. I thought that was really great. Wow, I haven't heard that one before. Could you expand on that one a little bit?
Yes. Collaboration is 2 people or more working together for a common goal.
Okay.
So
teamwork.
Yes, exactly. And that's what relationships are about, is teamwork. If you don't have collaboration and both of y'all are not fully invested in the relationship, then it becomes wonky and then you have issues.
Yeah. Okay. Well, seems more obvious now that I'm asking it. Yeah. Alrighty. And I also liked how you said you didn't just say communication when you were talking about it. You were, talking about making communication a priority with others. I think that's pretty unique because it shows us a little bit more than just talking to each other.
Communication is a priority and needs to be a key in any successful relationship, simply because how can I know what you're thinking if you don't tell me? How can I know how you're feeling about something if you don't tell me? I can assume, but that never turns out good, because how I assume and how I feel about something is completely different than how you do. And so when we are not able to communicate effectively about things, then you go around and you have these self-doubts and thoughts in your head of this is how the person feels, and it may be completely opposite of how they feel.
Yeah.
So you kind of get that cross lines with the assumptions, and it creates unhealthy situations.
Yeah, because then it breaks down the trust and breaks down the respect. And
Exactly.
Then it starts
and then
breaking all that
everything
down.
crumbles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, can you give us examples of healthy communication and maybe even unhealthy ones too?
Yeah. Healthy communication starts off with active listening, like giving your full attention to somebody when they're communicating with you and responding appropriately. Maintaining conversational tone is huge. Keeping body language respectful, engaged, and open. Be willing to acknowledge when you've been wrong, which is a big one. A lot of people don't like feeling that.
Like, you know what, owning and your part in.
Exactly. Yeah. Using I statements instead of assigning blame.
Can you give us an example of that one for I statements? Like, I've heard of that before, but some people might not know about what an I statement is.
Sure. I statements are where you reflect on how you feel. One of the ones that I like to use in therapy with people is you start off and you say, I feel blank when blank happens, or when blank is going on, or when blank, you say blank, it's basically.
Or this is said.
Yeah.
Taking the word you out of it.
Yeah. You're not assigning how you feel on them. And so you're basically owning how you feel, being able to verbalize, I feel angry when you say, I can't do something right. And people feel differently on different subjects, different things that are said to them. So being able to really hone in on what feelings that you're having yourself, and then being able to express that to somebody else can help grow your relationship.
And in my experience, when you're having that conversation in that kind of way, it makes the other person more willing to listen to you.
Yes.
Because when we don't do that, the defensive walls come up, and it doesn't matter what you're saying, they're not hearing it.
Exactly. And so then the breakdown of communication starts immediately.
But I statements are really powerful in helping them to be able to listen to what you're saying.
Some people struggle with honing in on that. A piece of advice that I would give to somebody would be take a breather from the conversation. Or, if something made you feel a certain type of way and you're not ready for that conversation, it's okay to say, hey, I need a moment. Yeah. And you go off and you really think about how you're truly feeling, write some things down, and then come back and be like, okay, I'm ready to talk about this. And then you have something in front of you, kind of like a guideline. Yeah. And it's not just, free willy-nilly where, you feel like you're kind of floundering on what to say and how you're actually feeling. Or then you should get flustered again and you don't know how to articulate it. And yeah. Okay. That's some really good advice there. So what are some other things? We got a list here. So what are some other things? Yeah. Making good eye contact, using appropriate language for the situation, having a willingness to compromise. A lot of people don't like compromising. Yeah. Giving positive feedback and showing appreciation. We do not show appreciation to other people enough, I feel like. And avoid using universal statements like you always or I never. That's a very general and broad statement. Yeah. You need to be specific. Not always true. Exactly. Like, well, sometimes, the other person does do the dishes, maybe not as many times in comparison as to what you would like, but the broad statement isn't generally true. Yeah. Which can also make them not want to listen to you. True. Unhealthy is using sarcasm, mocking someone, criticizing or blaming instead of taking responsibility, disrespectful language, refusing to apologize or acknowledging your mistakes, interrupting instead of listening, which a lot of people do. The flow of conversations, normally somebody who is not actively listening is already thinking of what they're going to say back to you. Rebuttal. I mean, it's already like in their head. So that means they're not actually taking in what you're saying. Yelling, name calling, any forms of verbal abuse, multitasking during a conversation.
Yeah.
If I want to have a serious conversation with you, I want you to be looking at me. I want your full attention. Put your phone aside.
Yeah, put the phone down. But this is put that phone away.
Yeah. If you have, and that's one thing that, you know, people who have children struggle with. If you have children, if you need to take yourself out of a situation where your children are around or the TV's going or whatever, go to a quiet place. I mean, the most quiet place in my house is probably the bathroom. I mean, I hate to say that, but, you know, have a conversation in a bathroom if you need to. Refusing to compromise, being overly emotional.
Yeah, what do you mean by that one a little bit? Just like not being able to calm down enough to have the conversation? Like, what exactly do you mean by that one?
Being overly emotional means that you're not in touch with actually how you're feeling. And so you're kind of all over the place with your emotions. There's like a wide range that you go through. And it could be that you're overly sensitive about, you know, having a conversation and telling somebody how you feel because you're worried that they're not going to accept, you know, how you feel, or they're going to say something negative back to you or criticize you or anything like that.
So maybe that's an indicator that something else is actually bothering you and not that the toaster didn't come up today.
Yeah.
Something else is
Being
happening.
overly emotional, there's an underlying something going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then one of the biggest ones is invalidating the other person's feelings.
Yeah. I've been guilty of that, unfortunately.
People do it all the time and not realize it.
Yeah. That does sound like a big one. But can you elaborate on that one just a little bit more so everyone else can be clear about what we mean when we say that?
Sure. Invalidating is denying, rejecting, or dismissing someone's feelings, making their emotional experience feel inaccurate, insignificant, and unacceptable. Some examples of these in conversations will, at least it's not blank, or it could be worse.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
I hate that one. That one gets...
That's a rough one.
That's a rough one. Because in some circles, especially professionally, you're kind of taught to say that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's awful. And actually, it's so infuriating.
Yeah. You shouldn't feel that way.
But I do.
Exactly. And you have the right to feel however you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do feel that way. Right. Yeah.
One of these two I probably hear a lot. Don't think about it or just move on. Why can't you just move on? Because how I feel is, you know, important. I can't move past that just yet.
And that was traumatic for me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry it wasn't traumatic for you, but yeah.
One of the biggest things in relationships, and it can be friendship, it can be marriage, it can be romantical, it can be even between parent and child.
Or siblings.
Yes, the silent treatment is very invalidating because you're screaming to the other person, I don't want to discuss this. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And you're dismissing them and how they feel.
It's not worth talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, validating someone is not saying, and I think that needs to be clarified, is not saying that you agree with how they feel about something. It basically, bottom line is, I hear you, I see you, I get it, and I care about your feelings.
Yeah.
That's it. And people associate validating with, I have to agree with how you're feeling about a certain situation, and that's just not what
You just have to
validating is.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah. And care to figure out, like, okay, well, how can we get out of this hole? You know?
Just, I mean,
Yeah.
you can even go basic than that. Just acknowledging.
Yeah. Yes.
Just
yes.
acknowledging.
That's good. Yeah. So what are so we're going to move on a little bit from that. I think those are all great things that we just mentioned there about what's unhealthy, what's healthy, what some things we can do. And if we've been doing some of these negative things, maybe we should all stop doing them. So we're going to go to another angle here about when is it okay to share something, when it's not okay to share something, just differences between privacy and sharing.
Privacy is the state of being apart from company or observation. Privacy is about being on your own with your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own experiences. It's about having a life that you don't share with others, and we're all entitled to privacy. We all are. Privacy is also a basic human need. We need that in our lives.
I mean, Jesus went off alone all the time.
Exactly.
To pray. But yeah.
Without a private life, we can't shut out the world. We can't drop our social mask. We can't discover who we are when we're not being observed.
That is so good. I like that last line there, or that last sentence you just said about like, without your private life, you cannot truly know yourself. Like,
yeah.
Wow. Like, I don't think enough people stop to think about that. Like, who am I? How do I feel? What do I believe in? You know, politics or not, or just basic things. Like, what do I really believe about this thing? And what does that mean for me? You know, I don't think enough of us do that, really. We just kind of parrot on what's already been said out there.
And the thing of it is, we all start off as our own individual.
Yeah.
We're not paired with anybody in the beginning. So why not continue that throughout life? To have our own identity away from everybody else. I mean, we have comorbid identities with like our parents and our families and relationships with other people, but it begins with our own identity of who we are. In order to get that, we have to have some level of privacy.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we're not carving that out for ourselves currently, we should probably start trying to do that, or let's at least on some basic things like, how am I feeling about today, or what's going on? You know, how does that affect me? So yeah, that's a very good point, Sarah Beth. Let's continue on with our comparison though. So we talked about privacy. So what about sharing?
Sharing. Sharing. If your partner, friend, significant other, whoever would feel angry or betrayed if they discovered any information themselves, then I feel it needs to be shared. Because if they're gonna feel angry or betrayed and you don't share, that crosses the I knew you were. That crosses the line into secrecy, which is negative.
So you're saying if they learned this thing about you and it didn't come from you first, and it came to light from another person or some other source, and they were to feel betrayed, then that's something you should have shared with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can also voluntarily share things that you would believe would increase the understanding of who you are and how life experiences helped you become who you are. So, for example, was married to a very abusive person. That helped create who I am. It took me a while to get to a point where I felt like I could share that with other people. Yeah. And now I do. I mean, I feel, especially when, you know, I started opening the possibility of dating again. Yeah. You know, like that's one of the first things I felt like I needed to share with that person. Hey, I have come from an abusive relationship, and these are some of my triggers. You know, and this is some of the things I will not tolerate because of what I've gone through. And so that helps them understand where I'm coming from and like how I am who I am today.
Yeah. And just, you know, our behaviors that might not be considered maybe normal, quote unquote, to other people. Like, well, I do it this way because, or I respond in this way because, yeah. I think that's good. But sometimes I know where is the line there with oversharing? Like where, because I feel like that's kind of a tricky line. So how do we know if we're falling into that, and what can we know and how can we do better about that?
for me, oversharing is you kind of have verbal diarrhea. So it's the easiest way for me to put it. Where, you just tell them about everything that you've experienced in life, like the little minute things that will not change your relationship or is not important for them to know as far as your relationship is concerned. For some people who, like, I cheated on my test when I was in the 5th grade. That's not important information. You see what I'm saying? That's not something that's going to make or break your relationship with somebody if they don't know that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Or, I stole a candy bar, at the convenience store when I was 10 years old. I mean,
I was just 5, but I was 5. I didn't know what I was doing, Sarah Beth. Come on, I'm feeling attacked. We all do things that in our past that that's stuff we can keep private. That's stuff that, people don't need to know. I mean, it's not going to change your relationship if that person knows that, unless you're still stealing, then yes. Yeah.
That's something that they need to know. That's part of your personality,
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean,
Well, do you ever feel like there's like too much too soon? Like, okay, that was kind of heavy. I wasn't prepared to hear that. And, today.
I do. You need to kind of gauge your audience as far as if it's something that's heavy, do you feel they are, first of all, ready, second of all, prepared, and third of all, able to accept?
Yeah.
Because if they're not able to do those things, then you're going to come with a negative reaction, and then you're not going to feel comfortable wanting to share that with somebody else in the future. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of going to want to like shut you down. So yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted some clarifications from the expert here on that, because I feel like in some ways we kind of set ourselves up for failure in that way, for a beginning relationship with a friend or colleague or whatever, whoever, even a romantic partner. I feel like sometimes you're setting yourself up for that in some ways if it's too much too soon. So, yeah. So I kind of want to go into a different area of conversation is about being codependent, because sometimes this kind of happens with people in relationships. So how do you know if you're in a codependent relationship? And
codependency often has you funneling your energy into supporting the people in your life without making space for or even considering what you need for yourself. Codependency is a way of behaving in relationships where you persistently prioritize someone else over you, and you assess your mood based on how they behave. If you behave in codependent ways and you just don't offer support temporarily, such as when a loved one faces a setback, instead you tend to focus on caretaking and caring for others to the point that you begin to define yourself in relation to their needs.
Defining yourself in relation to their needs. Yikes.
Yeah. You cannot separate yourself from them as far as identity. You don't have your own. You take theirs on.
So can you give an example of that?
Yeah. There's several that I gave.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop when I started.
Okay.
A deep-seated need for approval for others. Self-worth that depends on what others think about you. Habits of taking on more work than you can realistically handle, both to earn praise or even to lighten the loved one's burden. A tendency to apologize or take on blame in order to keep the peace. A pattern of avoiding conflict. A tendency to minimize or ignore your own desires. Excessive concern about a loved one's habits or behaviors. A habit of making decisions for others or trying to manage loved ones. A mood that reflects how others feel rather than your own emotions. Guilt or anxiety when doing something for yourself. Doing things that you really don't want to do simply to make others happy. idealizing partners or loved ones, often to the point of maintaining relationships that leave you unfulfilled, and then overwhelming fears of rejection and abandonment.
Dang. But some of these, though, like, they don't seem bad by themselves. Like, okay, like, some things, don't you have to do things you don't really want to do for other people, you know?
You do, but this is when you can do it once in a while, and you don't take it on for long term.
Okay.
Doing any of these for a long term.
Chronic.
Yes. Yeah. Is where you end up becoming codependent, where you can't do things without them. And so that's where you kind of come into the trouble of the codependency in relationships.
Man. So what can a person do to get out of a friendship or just a relationship like that? I mean, because it almost sounds a little bit like an addiction, you know, like having that, to be at that level with that person.
First of all, recognizing that you are codependent. Secondly, being able to gain some good coping skills and good boundaries. Now, I will say, when you start establishing those boundaries with somebody who you've been codependent with, they will not like it.
Yeah, because they're used to doing whatever they want to do. And you're just there to cheerlead them on.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are not going to like the change.
Yeah.
So, then you run into the question of, is this relationship healthy or unhealthy? Which 9 times out of 10, it's going to be unhealthy.
And should I still be in it?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's tough. But if it's for your good, I mean, just kind of like, well, is it better to be a couch potato or to be walking around? You know, like what's for your health? You know, what's going to propel you to be your best you? You know, so you can be your best for others. And, you know, since this is actually from a Christian perspective as well, like, so we can glorify God, because that's, if we can only give God the glory when we're being who he made us to be.
Yes.
And if we're not being who he made us to be, we're not accomplishing that. So, yeah, man. So in your years of practice, have you seen like this kind of a codependency thing? Is it more just from friendships or like romantic relationships? And what have you seen it kind of more lying in? With
just codependency, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's kind of like an equal across the playing field. But if you get more in depth and end up in like a relationship with somebody who has personality disorder, narcissistic, borderline, things like that, most of those tend to be of a romantic nature because they don't start off that way.
Yeah.
And so they kind of groom the other person into being codependent on them.
Could the other person who was being the dominant person in that relationship, would they even know that they're even being that way?
Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And I will say, having, personality disorders, those are some of the most difficult people to treat because it's not me.
It's the other.
It's everybody else.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that does sound really difficult. So kind of going in more just with talking about friends, just this kind of friendships here. We were just talking about being a codependent with maybe like one person, one friend. So is there a benefit, or would it be helpful to have like many friends, or and with that, what I mean is it, yeah, I know it's okay to have more than just one friend, but is there a cap to that? Like, is how many friends we should really have? Like, how many close friends we should really have? Is there a number that's too many? Or like, are you really friends with that many people? I mean, truly friends. What do you say about that?
There's really no right number of friends that you should have. It's individualized depending on the person. But research says most people have between 3 to 5 close friends.
Truly close friends.
Yeah, truly close. Yeah. And the rest of them would be considered like acquaintances.
Or maybe situational friends.
Yeah.
Like if I'm at this place and we happen to see each other all the time at this place, you're my friend in that circle.
Yeah. Like a work friend.
Yeah. Like
Our gym friend.
Yeah. Or a nail friend if that's your thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm feeling with that. So what about acquaintances? Is there like an okay number of those many people? Should you have a cap with that? Because I'm asking because, some people are kind of like reclusive and they're like, well, why do I need friends? Why do I know all these people? And then there's others who are like, I'm a butterfly. I got to know all the people. So just kind of a gauge on that. What do you feel from your professional opinion?
I mean, it goes back to, there's really no specific number and it varies among people. I mean, I think even people who are reclusive have some acquaintances if they work.
Yeah.
If they go get groceries. I mean, they're going to have some
relationship somewhere.
Yeah. They're going to have some connections with somebody at some point. So I have concerns with people who have an abundance of friends and acquaintances. Normally it means that they're kind of lacking and needing something.
Why do you say that?
Simply because when you have true friendship, whether it's with one person, 3 people, 5 people, a need is being met as far as like a personal relationship with somebody else that you can go to for support, cheerleading, that just gets who you really are.
Yeah.
When you have an abundance of friends, there's no way that if you have like, I get tickled at people who have, buku people friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? you know, like how many of these would you consider like a true friend?
Yeah.
Like if something really exciting happened in your life, how many of them outside of Facebook and posting it would you call personally
to tell?
Yeah. So
do you really have 20 good friends?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is, one thing that a lot of people sometimes don't understand is that what you need from your friends might change as your life circumstances.
Oh, yeah.
Change.
Definitely.
So, for instance, I've got a best friend that I've had since high school, and our relationship has evolved, and it's been crazy to look back and see how it's evolved and where we are now and what we need from each other now. And we don't need to talk every day like we did when we were teenagers.
Right.
I mean, it's very interesting how things evolve and people come in and out of your life, and God puts people, who you end up having close relationships with for a reason. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason behind the relationship, and it may just be for that season.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some friends like that because I haven't always lived just here in West Virginia. I've lived in some other places before, and I have some friendships like that. And a few of them I actually would call up and say, hey, this is what's going on in my life. And one of them, I remember when I was pregnant with Asher, I called her, she's living back in Denton, Texas. I was like, hey, could you make some cookies for me, and for my gender reveal? And she's like, yeah, like all about it, and that kind of stuff. But but we don't talk every day. But yeah, I think that's good too. That just that reminder of like the sovereignty of God in that moment. Like God placed certain people in your life at a certain time. It's kind of special to me. Yeah. So I guess the overarching question is like, do we need friends? Like, is it biblical to have all these friends in our lives? Can a man be an island? I think scripture says no, but
you just answered your question.
I know, but I want to hear from you, someone that works with people all the time. Like,
people do need friends.
Yeah.
People do need connections. Is it biblical? God did not intend for us to go through life on our own.
Yeah.
Wise friends make a major difference in how we respond to trials. God created friendship as a solution to our loneliness and a necessary source of wisdom when we need it. And there are several verses in Proverbs that just scream about friendship and, the biblical purpose of having friendships.
Yeah, we've been taught to seek wise counsel, and like in addition to prayer and reading the scripture when we're making like big life choices and things like that. So, yeah.
Binnacle. The biblical benefits of having friendship is our wise friends. They help guide us, teach us, protect us, and they help mature us as individuals in our relationship with Christ.
Mm-hmm. I just mentioned in my last series there, I had a very good friend of mine who just said, Brandy, like, who does God say that you are? And to me, that's just a very wise thing to say. Like, she's much younger than me, but not in Christ.
Yeah.
And she's able to steer that. And I think we all knew friends like that. Or friends that just happened to say, I had a friend many years ago, I'm not in touch with anymore, but at the time it said, Brandy, I really think you're like getting your value from your accomplishments, and that was huge. I needed to hear that. We need friends that are able to say those kinds of things to us. Wise friends. I like the way that you said that for sure. Yeah. So we talked about friends a lot for right now. So I'd like to turn in and talk a little bit about family as well. Because, man, family, we love them, but, man, that can be tough. Like, tough. And you can never be untethered from family, it seems like. You can move away from your friends, but family's just always there. That blood's always thicker than water somehow. So let's talk about them. And I guess to start that off with, we'll talk about parents. How can we live out the command of honoring one's parents when they don't always honor us, or we don't feel that honored on the child part?
The Bible says, honor your father and mother. As parents' position as father and mother is appointed by God. There's no exception to that command. Therefore, parents don't get honor because they deserve it. They get honor because they are appointed.
Yeah.
So you still, no matter what, you still need to honor your parents.
Yeah. And this is a sticky part too. I remember I was in my early 20s when I realized this. My parents will always be my parents, even when they've passed on. They're still always my parents, and I'll always be their daughter. Always. Which means there's a certain way that we're both required to act towards each other.
Yes.
But I like that you pointed out being appointed to that, just like in the work world, you respect the position, and hopefully they respect it enough as well to do their part in what it's supposed to be. But sometimes it's hard to do that when it's like, you're like, well, you're supposed to be this, and that expectation is not being met. Well, how can you still do what God has commanded you to do in those moments?
Yeah.
I think you have something to share, or you've mentioned me before about some things what honor is not. Can you share that for a second though?
Yes. Honor is not obedience. Honor is not praise or speaking well of. Honor is not a feeling. And honor is not something that a parent can demand.
So honor is not obedience. Like, can you speak on that for a second?
Yes. That is kind of based on what we've been talking about, unhealthy relationships.
Yeah.
And the Bible does say that, you are to obey your parents in everything. But it also says in the Bible that we are not to fall into sin. So if your parents are doing things that are sinful, and still demanding you to honor them or asking you to honor them, you're kind of, per the Bible, enabling the sin to continue.
Yeah.
So that creates, as far as like the unhealthy relationship. And in Acts 5:29, it says we must obey God rather than any human authorities. And that's even our parents. You know, like God says we are not supposed to sin. So if your parents are sinning and God's telling you not to go against that, you know, to not sin, then how can you actually continue to obey your parents as far as that is concerned? Yeah.
Yeah. And we were created to glorify God first.
Exactly.
You know, and I think it's in Hebrews, I'm not really sure. But I know there's a point where it's okay to go against our governing authorities if they're, you know, breaking God's command or breaking God's law and what God wants us to do and how we are supposed to live. So I feel like it kind of goes hand in hand with that. And with all scripture, you can't just take one verse and pluck it out and go with that. Well, I'm your mom, so you have to do what I say.
Exactly.
Well, there's also some stewardship on your part. Like, how are you leading and what are you asking of them to do? You know?
I mean, God in the Bible says he wants our families to be faithful and to serve him. And, you know, when they do that, then obedience just follows. I mean, there's no question. But when we have our parents who are not setting the example that they need to, as far as like, you know, God's law and what's in the Bible, then it's not easy to follow in obedience, because then you are going against what God wants you to do.
Yeah. So how can we still show honor even though when they are not deserving of it, or maybe they're not, like we just said, like they're not doing how they should be? How can we still give them honor? How can we still uphold that?
For me, it kind of starts off with like, you know, forgiveness. You know, we still have to kind of be like Christ, you know, being able to forgive, always acknowledging that they are appointed our mom and dad by God, no matter what, acknowledging that they did their best. Yeah. And that you will treat them with as much gentleness and respect as you can. And that you will do what is reasonably asked without compromising or forsaking yourself. Yeah. Who God calls us to be. Like that Christ-centered identity. Be appreciative of the things that they, you know, that they've done in the past growing up, and that they continue probably to still do as our parents. Spend time with them if you feel emotionally safe to do so. As far as when it goes back to that unhealthy, possibly toxic, abusive relationship. I mean, you know, that just kind of like depends. Set boundaries and hope that they see them as like little guide rails. You know, when you're bowling, they put those little chutes up on the thing where you can't get a gutter ball. Yeah. You know, just little bumpers. Hey, stay within these, you know, these little lines that I have. And it can lead to a good relationship with me. Yeah. And then the last one is just not to reject any opportunities for reconciliation. Yeah. But I might require something more than what you're willing to give. As far as like, you feel you should be able to reconciliate our relationship by just apologizing. Yeah. I feel there may be something else that needs to happen. I think that is such a wonderful statement there. That's just awesome. Like, like, I'm sorry, like that's good. That's step one, but I need some more wood there so we can rebuild that bridge, because that bridge there has been broken, either from maybe it was the respect, or maybe it was the trust, or, you know, the abandonment, especially if it's a parent-child relationship. In some way, we need to do some more things before we can get there. And I also think it's great that you mentioned boundaries, and how it's not a way to shut someone off, but a way to actually help build it back up. Yeah. And to see it that way, you know. And just listening to that and on that, you know, that list there, I'm like, wow, like, I feel like God does that with us, you know, he continuing, you know, to give those opportunities for reconciliation. He does it all the time, daily. Yeah. You know, and he also sets boundaries for us. He does. He does. There's have still a great relationship with him. Yeah. There's still consequences to those bad things we do, even though we're forgiven by his blood and by his grace. Like, there's still consequences out there.
You know, like he just didn't wipe it out. Like people still die right now. It's only his second return that's going to be completely wiped out.
Yep.
So we still have to live by that. Yeah. That's a very good advice there for sure. So what are some other things that we can do?
Some other things that you can do if you've kind of tried to establish all the things that we just talked about and you're just not kind of getting anywhere.
Yeah.
You can yearn for a good relationship while you're accepting the reality that it may not ever happen.
Yeah.
That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then also on the flip side of that, you never want to give up hope. I mean, you never know when God can touch their heart at any point, you know, and if you've given up hope and you've kind of just shut them out, I mean, it's kind of hard to reestablish and rekindle. So you never want to give up hope about, you know, because I mean,
yeah, because God he can do anything, and who are you to to say that God can't? You know, he really can. And I think here what I'm hearing is like we should that's when we lean into that prayer for the other person. And this is how when we can love our enemies. Like when God says that, that's what he means. Because in that moment, when they are being toxic towards us, they are acting as an enemy.
Because they're not supportive. They're not, you know,
There's some emotional things that aren't being met there that are important. But that is how we are able to really by that prayer and the praying for them, we're ministering to ourselves because God's able to comfort us in those moments. Hopefully feeling that hope from him that he's given to us. You know, and eventually just knowing that God does have the power to change people. I mean, he changed you. If you're a believer, he changed you. He changed your heart.
He did.
So, yeah, just clinging to those things for sure. Yeah, definitely agree with that. So, you mentioned earlier a little about boundaries. Like, how can you know when to set boundaries and when to walk away? Like, when it's like, okay, this is unsafe for me, because you mentioned about being safe. How can we know that?
Some key points without delving off into the boundary world is begin early with boundaries. When you start seeing somebody or you feel like somebody is starting to cross boundaries, immediately start implementing. Yeah. Conversation, there we go again, communication is key. Yeah. Just being able to express yourself using the I statements. And then it's okay to ask somebody for space. Yeah. A lot of people don't feel like they can, but I mean, it's perfectly fine to ask for space. You can also identify, as far as that's concerned, like to where you feel like you need to set boundaries in toxic relationships, is that the negative significantly outweighs the positive in y'all's interactions. Yeah. Yeah. So if you think about it, you know, if you're upset, crying, very emotional, more than you are happy, something you really need to like do a soul search for. Yeah. Maybe just, especially if it's a parent, maybe just limit those conversations, limit those interactions. Yeah. Not cutting it off. No. But limiting it. Yeah. Yeah. We talked about friends and family. So some of the common signs that you can see with toxic behavior with friends and family is their perception of you doesn't jive with the way you see yourself. Yeah, two opposing things. Yes. They accuse you of things that you feel aren't true. Some gaslighting there. Yes. They make you feel like you're never enough, or you're bad about yourself, or otherwise emotionally not stable. They don't take responsibility for any of their actions, harmful or not. They manipulate, make you feel guilty. They put you down, humiliate you. They lie about things that make you feel bad. They bully, harass you, insults, criticize, repeat terrible things about you. They're nasty, mean, frequently engage in gaslighting, which is making you feel like your feelings or memories aren't valid or true, or blaming you for things that they did. Prime example, if you get upset about something somebody has done to you, said or whatever, and you try to have a conversation with that person, and you're using, your communication, your I statements, you're doing everything that you possibly can to make this a positive communication between two people, and that other person talks, and then by the end of the conversation, you are the one who are apologizing for something. They just gaslit you, babe. They just gaslit you bad.
Or I've even had this experience. Like, that's the word gaslighting itself is not something I even knew the word itself, or much less what it meant, until like a few years ago when I was experiencing that. And when I'm like, I was feeling crazy. I'm like, I know this happened. I know I felt this way. But when I talked to this person, they made me feel all kind of turned around. And I'm like it didn't, like what I knew to be true wasn't true. And that was awful, because I felt like, am I going crazy? And it led me to feel like just really angry every day, and this build up of that.
Yeah,
so
put you in a negative headspace.
For sure. Because I'm like, because then I'm spun around trying to figure out, wait a minute. No, I still feel this way. And what?
Everything I just read basically is a form of manipulation. And that is what a toxic relationship, one of the main goals is to manipulate the other person. And so with manipulation and gaslighting, the key to that is simply just to make you question yourself. And I'll go a step further as far as making it biblical.
Yeah.
The devil is the god of confusion. Plain and simple.
Chaos.
Exactly.
Yeah, he likes the chaos for sure.
So basically, you're in an unhealthy relationship and this person is doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you make the comparison.
Yeah, it's not something you want to be in. Definitely some walls you want to put up for sure.
Yeah.
Some bumper walls, or whatever you want to call it. For sure. Yeah. So where's the hope, Sarah Beth? Like, we just talked about some nasty things here, a lot of unhealthy, toxic stuff. Where's our hope? What can we do about it? What does Jesus say that we can do about all this?
I think the ultimate bottom line is that Jesus is our beacon of hope. Like, he is our hope. He is the only one who can give us peace, can give us that hope for a brighter future in our relationship with him. Yeah. So there are several verses that, we can kind of go over. Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart, for it's the wellspring of life. John 13:35, know us by his love. I mean, there's several things that we can look at as far as hope in the Bible. But ultimately, Jesus gives us hope because, he gives us the hope to be able to change. He gives us the hope to be able to have healthy relationships with Christian people. He gives us, all of this gamut. I mean, so he is the hope. That would be my response to that question. He is the hope.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, Sarah Beth. It really is. And if we need to step further into that, I mean, we have the word to do that for us, where it gives us the layout, how we can find that hope in him. It's just acknowledging that Christ has given it to us. He died for that. We matter to him, acknowledging that he is above everything else. And that's how you can have that today. You can have that peace for yourself. You can manage these toxic and unhealthy relationships. You can, through Christ and having him there as your shield and having him be your wall, those things can be rebuilt. So he is the hope, for sure. Well, Sarah Beth, and I'm so thankful for you coming out today. This has been such a great conversation. Such wisdom has been shared here. I know this has helped somebody today.
My name is Sarah Beth, and this is my story of the middle.
I'm your host, Brandy Bostic, and you've been listening to the Up From the Muck podcast. If you're interested in hearing a little extra, check out my Patreon account and the show notes for ways to get merch and other cool perks.
Psalms 40, verse 2. He brought me up from a desolate pit, out of the muddy clay, and set my feet on rock, making my steps secure.